I still remember the smell of the coffee before I remember the noise. That sounds like a strange thing to lead with, I know, but that's how memory works, isn't it? It doesn't care what's important. It just grabs whatever it grabs and holds on. And for me, it was the coffee, milky, a little burnt, the kind they sell from those silver carts near the park gates for £4 and make you feel robbed and grateful at the same time. I was holding that paper cup when the morning changed. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter much for this. People call me Dev. I'd come over from Leicester for 2 days, nothing fancy, just a trip I'd promised my mother I'd take her on for years and kept not taking. She'd wanted to see the guards. The proper ones, she said, the ones who don't move. She was 68 and she'd lived in this country her whole adult life and somehow never stood in front of that palace. You know how it is. The things closest to you are the things you save for last. So there we were, a Tuesday in late spring. The sky was that flat London gray that can't decide if it's going to rain on you or not, and the air had that green, wet leaf smell that comes off Hyde Park in the morning. We'd walked up from the hotel near Lancaster Gate, slow, because Mum's knees aren't what they were, and we'd stopped for that coffee, and we were heading down toward the main road where the crowds thicken up. There's a thing about London mornings that I never noticed until that day. They're loud, but it's a soft loud. Buses sighing, pigeons, somebody's suitcase wheels rattling over the pavement, a street musician somewhere doing a sad version of a happy song, tourists in 7 languages all asking each other the same questions. It all blends into this hum, and after a while you stop hearing it the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. I was thinking about nothing, honestly. I was thinking about whether the coffee was too hot to drink yet. That was the whole of my mind. And then the world went white and flat and silent. I want to be careful here because people who weren't there imagine an explosion is one big bang and then chaos. It isn't, not from where I was. It was more like someone pressed pause on everything and then pressed a different button I'd never felt before. There was a pressure, a push, like a hand the size of a building shoving you in the chest. My coffee was just gone. I don't remember it leaving my hand. I remember my hand being empty and wet and that being confusing. The sound came after. It arrived a half-second late, this enormous low crack that I felt in my teeth more than I heard with my ears, and then a long rolling rumble like furniture falling down a staircase that has no bottom. It happened somewhere off to our left, east toward the park's far edge near the road, not on top of us. I understood that much immediately in the animal part of the brain that does its sums before you've even caught up. Not on top of us. Close, though, close enough. And then the screaming started, and the birds went up. That's the image that stays. Thousands of pigeons and starlings lifting off every tree and every roofline at the exact same moment. This huge dark sheet of wings tearing into the gray sky, all of them shrieking. I'd never seen birds do that. I didn't know the sky could hold that many. Mum, I said, or I think I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from another room. Mum. She was on the ground. Not hurt, I need to say that now, before your stomach drops the way mine did, because mine dropped through the pavement. She just sat down hard, the way you do when your legs make a decision without you. She was sitting on the wet path with her handbag still over her shoulder and her glasses crooked and her mouth open, and she was looking at me, and I was looking at her, and neither of us said anything for what felt like an hour and was probably a second. Then everyone moved at once. You've maybe seen crowds in films when something goes wrong. They all run in one neat direction like a school of fish. It is not like that. It is the opposite of that. People ran every way. People ran toward the noise to see, and people ran away from the noise to live, and the two groups smashed into each other in the middle and nobody could move. A man went past me so fast he spun me half around, didn't touch me, just the wind of him. Somebody's pram. Somebody's dog off its lead, low to the ground, ears flat, running flat out at nothing. A woman near me kept saying, "Okay, okay, okay, okay," like if she said it enough it would become true. I got down to my mother. I got my arms around her. I remember her shoulder was so small under my hand and I thought, ridiculous thing to think, I thought, when did she get so small? Are you hurt? I said, right in her ear because the world had filled up with noise again, sirens already, far off but already that city is fast. Mum, are you hurt anywhere? Look at me. My ears, she said. Devraj, my ears are ringing. That's okay. That's okay, that's normal, that's just the bang. I didn't know if it was normal. I had no idea. I was making my voice be a thing it wasn't calm, and she heard the calm and not the lie and she nodded. I got her up. We got over to the railing, the black iron railing that runs along that part of the park, and she held it with both hands and I stood with my back to the open ground like my body could be a wall, which it couldn't, but you do it anyway. And that's when I looked across the road. I have to describe what I saw very carefully, because it's the whole reason I ever tell this story. And if I rush it, you won't understand it the way I need you to. Across the road, past the chaos, past the running and the abandoned coffee carts and one bicycle lying on its side with its front wheel still spinning, there was a sentry box. One of the small ceremonial posts, the kind you walk past on a normal day and barely notice. And in front of it stood a guard. He was in the full uniform. The dark trousers, the red of the tunic gone almost brown in that gray light, the tall black bearskin cap that always looks too big and too serious, like the hat is taking the whole thing more seriously than the man underneath could. A rifle held at his side, the way they hold them, that exact angle they're trained into until it's part of their skeleton. And he was not moving. I don't mean he was frozen with fear. I want to be clear about the difference because it took me a moment to understand it myself, and it's the most important thing I'll tell you. Frozen with fear has a quality to it. You can see it. The shoulders climb up toward the ears, the eyes go wide and wet and dart, the hands shake. I have seen that face. Half the crowd around me was wearing that face right then. I was probably wearing it. This was not that. This man stood like the explosion had been a thing that happened to a different planet. Spine straight, eyes forward, fixed on some point across the road that only he could see. His chin was level. His hands were still. The birds were screaming over his head, and 100 people were running past the front of his post, and somewhere east of him, a column of pale dust and dark smoke was climbing into the sky, and he stood there like a man carved out of the morning itself. And I thought, I'm not proud of this, but I'll tell you the truth. I thought, what is wrong with him? Run, you idiot, run. That was my first feeling. Anger almost. It seemed insane. It seemed like the most stupid bravery in the world to stand there in a costume holding a ceremonial rifle while the city came apart, just because some rule book said you stood still. I wanted to run across the road and grab him and shake him and say, this is real. This isn't the parade, you can move. I didn't, obviously. I had my mother, and the road between us was a river of panic. But I couldn't stop looking at him. The sirens were closer now. The first response was coming in fast off the main road, and you could hear the city's whole emergency machine waking up and turning toward us, that rising tide of sound. People were starting to find each other. That's a thing crowds do after the first wave of panic burns off. They start grabbing for the people they came with, calling names, and the air fills up with names. Sophie, Sophie. Has anyone? Where's my? Tom, Tom, over here, Tom. A man near us was on the ground and not getting up, and 3 strangers were already around him. One of them on her knees with her ear to his chest, one on the phone, the third just holding the man's hand and saying, "You're all right, mate, you're all right. Ambulance is coming." And they didn't know him, you understand. They'd never met him. They just knelt down in the wet because that's what you do. That's the part nobody tells you about a disaster. How fast the good comes out. It comes out faster than the bad, actually. The bad makes the headline, but the good is everywhere in the first 60 seconds. Ordinary people just deciding, without a word, that they will not leave a stranger alone on the ground. My mother was watching the guard too now. I felt her hand tighten on my arm. "Why isn't he moving?" she said. Same thing I'd thought. "Devraj, the boy, why isn't he moving?" "The boy?" She called him the boy. And once she said it, I saw it too. Under that enormous serious hat he was young. Young the way soldiers are always younger than you expect when you actually look. 22, 23. Somebody's son. Standing alone on the worst morning of a year, holding still while every instinct in his body had to be roaring at him to break and run like the rest of us. "I don't know, Mum," I said. But I was starting to understand, or starting to start to. Because here is what I noticed, standing there with my back to the open park, watching him across that river of fear. People were looking at him. Not just me, not just my mother. As the first wave thinned and people stopped running blind and started to gather themselves, more and more of them were turning, the way you turn toward a fixed thing in a current, and they were finding him. That still red figure in front of the little box, and something was happening to them when they found him. I watched it happen on face after face. They'd be wild, that wide-eyed, lost look, and their eyes would land on him, on that impossible stillness, and you could see something in them get a half-degree calmer. Like he was a lighthouse and they were boats, and they hadn't even known they were looking for a light until they saw one. A woman steered her 2 kids over to the wall near his post. Of all the places she could have gone, she went there, near him, and crouched down and pulled them in, and you could see her choosing it. Choosing to be near the still thing. He never looked at them. He never broke. But he had become, without moving a muscle, the calmest point in a square mile of terror, and the terror was quietly organizing itself around him. That's when the anger left me. That's when I stopped thinking, "Run, you idiot." Because I finally got it. If he ran, if that one fixed red point in all that gray chaos suddenly bolted, what would happen to the half-degree of calm he was giving 100 frightened people? It would shatter. The lighthouse would go dark. And every boat would know in that instant that there was no light, that it was every man for himself, and the panic would double back on itself and people would get crushed in the running. He wasn't standing still because of a rule book. I mean, maybe the rule book was where it started. Maybe at first it was just training, just the thing they'd hammered into him on some parade ground until it was reflex. You hold your post. You do not break. Whatever happens, you do not break. Maybe in the first half second it was only that. But it wasn't only that anymore. You could see, even from across the road, that it had become a decision. That somewhere in those first seconds the boy under the hat had understood exactly what I was only now understanding, that the most useful thing his body could do, the bravest and the hardest thing, was nothing. Was to stand. Was to be the still point that other people could steer by. It is a very strange thing to watch a person choose to be a wall. I didn't know yet what had actually happened east of us. None of us did. There were already rumors moving through the crowd the way they do, faster than fact, uglier than fact. Somebody said it was a gas main. Somebody said it was a van. Somebody said a word I won't repeat, and that word moved through the crowd like a cold wind and made everybody's shoulders climb again. Nobody knew anything. That's the truth of being inside it. You know less than the people watching at home, not more. You're just a body in the noise. What I did know was this. There was a column of smoke maybe 300 yards off, near where the park meets the busy road, and the sirens were converging on it, and the sky was full of birds that wouldn't come down, and my mother was shaking against my side. And across a river of running strangers, a young man in a red coat was standing perfectly, impossibly still. And slowly, slowly, the morning was arranging its fear around his stillness like iron filings around a magnet. Then I saw the police line start to form, and I saw something move toward the guard's post that made my whole chest go tight. A man. Not running away. Running toward him. Toward the post, toward the palace ground behind it, fast and low and wrong, cutting against the whole flow of the crowd. And there was something about the way he moved, too direct, too decided, while everyone else moved like scattered leaves. That made the back of my neck go cold before my brain had a single reason for it. I opened my mouth. I think I was going to shout something, I don't know what, a warning to no one. And the guard, who had not moved, not once, not a hair, through the blast and the birds and the screaming and all of it. The guard moved, the guard moved. I have to slow this down, because in real life it took maybe 4 seconds, and in my memory it takes 4 years. He didn't run, I want that clear. He didn't break his post and bolt the way I'd half expected, the way some part of me had been bracing for since the blast. What he did was sharper than running and somehow more frightening. He came off the box, that ceremonial stillness that had held through everything, and he came down off it in one clean movement, rifle coming up across his body, and he stepped into the path of the running man and planted himself there. Square. Whole. A wall again, but a moving wall now. A wall that had chosen exactly where to be. Halt! I heard it across the road, across all that noise. He didn't shout it like a frightened person shouts. He shouted it the way you drive a nail, one strike, no waste, all of it landing. A voice trained to be heard over a parade band was now being heard over a disaster, and it cut through everything. Halt, stay where you are. And the running man, he stopped. Not because he wanted to. He stopped the way you stop when a thing appears in front of you that your body refuses to run into. He pulled up so hard he nearly went over, arms wheeling, and there was a half-second where the two of them just stood there, frozen, the still red figure and the wild gray one, 3 feet apart, the whole morning balanced on a point. My heart was going so hard I could feel it in my throat. My mother's nails were in my forearm. I thought, God help me. I thought I was about to watch something terrible. I'd let the rumors into my head, that ugly word that had moved through the crowd, and I'd hung it on the stranger. And now I was watching a young soldier face him down alone, and I thought I knew how it ended. I was wrong about almost all of it. Because the running man started to scream, and it wasn't a threat. It was the worst sound I have ever heard a grown person make. My boy, he's in there, my son, please. He was right there. And he was trying to get past, trying to go around the guard toward the smoke, toward the road where the blast had been, and the guard kept stepping with him, kept being in his way, not rough, just there, an immovable thing wherever the man tried to go. A father. He was a father. He'd been on the far side near the road with his kid, and the blast had thrown them apart in the running, and now there was a boy somewhere in that smoke or that crowd or that nightmare, and the man was out of his mind, the way you would be, the way anyone would be, and he was trying to run straight into the most dangerous patch of ground in London because his child might be in it. And here is the thing that broke me, watching. Here is the thing I think about still. The guard did not let him pass. He couldn't. You understand that, I hope, even though it sounds cruel when I say it flat like that. He couldn't let a civilian run into an unsecured blast site, toward whatever might still be there, toward a second device for all anyone knew, toward live wires and falling glass and 100 ways to die. His training knew that. You do not let people run into the fire, even when they're begging you to, even when their reason is the best reason in the world. He held the line. But he did not hold it like a wall of stone. I was close enough now, the crowd had thinned and I'd edged us along the railing closer. I couldn't help it, I was close enough to see his face for the first time. And the face was not the blank parade face anymore. The face was a young man's face fighting itself. His jaw was tight. His eyes, those eyes that had been fixed on nothing through the whole blast, his eyes were on the father now, fully on him, and they were not cold. They were the opposite of cold. There was something happening behind them that looked almost like pain. What does he look like? The guard said it low, fast, under the man's screaming. Sir, look at me. What does your son look like? The father didn't hear him the first time. He was too far gone. So the guard said it again, harder, the nail-strike voice but aimed like a hand grabbing a drowning person. What does he look like? And it got through. It cut into the panic, and the father stopped fighting to get past for just 1 second and looked at him. Red, he's got a red coat, a little red coat, he's 7, he's got. And the man's voice came apart completely. And the guard turned his head, just his head, the rest of him still a wall in front of the father, and he started to scan the crowd. Working it. Section by section. The way you'd sweep a field. And he was talking the whole time, low and steady, this stream of calm pouring out of him toward the father, We're going to find him. We are, but you cannot go in there. If you go in there, I can't keep you safe and I can't help you. Look, do you understand me? I need you here." It was the most extraordinary thing. He was doing three impossible things at once. He was holding his post and the security of the ground behind him, which was his actual duty, the thing he was placed there to do. He was physically stopping a desperate man from running to his death. And he was, somehow, with whatever was left of him, being kind, being human, refusing to let the no be a cold no, turning you cannot pass into we will find him together. I have thought a lot since about what discipline actually is. I used to think it was the absence of feeling, standing still, face blank, feeling nothing. That's what it looks like from the outside on a normal day when you photograph one of them and laugh because they won't smile. I had it completely backwards. Discipline isn't the absence of feeling. It's feeling everything, the fear, the pull to run, the unbearable wish to just let the poor man go to his child, feeling every bit of it and still doing the harder right thing. The stillness isn't empty. The stillness is full to bursting. It's just that none of it is allowed to spill where it would hurt someone. That boy was feeling everything, and not one drop of it spilled the wrong way. "Mum," I said. "Mum, stay here, hold the rail, do not move." "Devraj." "A little boy, Mum. Red coat. 7, he's lost." And something went across my mother's face, 68 years old and frightened half to death, and she let go of my arm and gripped the railing and said, go on, find him." I went into the crowd. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound good. I want to be honest. I went partly because I couldn't bear to keep standing still. The way you reach for anything to do with your hands when waiting is unbearable. But I went, and I wasn't the only one. Because the guard's voice had carried, and that word, little boy, red coat, lost, had moved through the nearer part of the crowd the way the ugly rumors had moved through it earlier. Except this was the opposite of a rumor. This was a thing people could do, and you would not believe how fast strangers will pick up a job like that and run with it. Within a minute there were a dozen of us, then more, calling it out, passing it back. Little boy, red coat. Anyone, a little boy on his own. People who'd been frozen in shock a moment ago snapped into it, glad of it, glad to have one small fixable thing in a morning of unfixable ones. A woman lifted her own toddler onto her hip so she could see better over the heads. 2 teenagers split up and went opposite ways along the railing. An older man in a high-vis vest, some workman who'd been on a site nearby, started organizing us with these big calm gestures. "You that way, you check by the gate, you." And the whole time, the still point of it, the thing it all turned around, was the guard. Back at his post now, he'd walked the father the few steps back to the box and stood him against it, a hand on the man's shoulder for 1 second, just one, the only time he touched him, and then his hand was back on the rifle and he was a sentry again, upright, fixed, the father shaking beside him. But you could feel that he was still running the search in his head. His eyes never stopped moving over the crowd, even while the rest of him went back to stone. He turned his post into a meeting point. That's what I realized. By standing exactly where he stood, by being the one fixed landmark in a churning crowd, he'd given 100 frightened strangers a place to bring things to. If you found the boy, you'd know where to bring him. To the red coat by the box. To the still man. Everyone knew where the still man was. It was a girl who found him. Maybe 19. Pink hair, a nose ring, a denim jacket. I remember her so clearly because she was the last person you'd cast as the hero, and that's exactly the point I keep coming back to. She came pushing through the crowd with a small boy on her hip, a little boy in a red coat with his face buried in her shoulder, and his arms locked around her neck, and she was shouting, "I've got him. Is anyone, I've got a little boy." And her voice was cracking because she was 19 and terrified too. She just scooped up a stranger's screaming child off the ground because someone had to. The father heard it before he saw it. I watched it hit him. He came off that sentry box like something released from a trap, and he was across the space in 3 strides, and the girl was holding the boy out, and the father took him and just folded. down onto his knees, right there on the wet path, his whole body curled around that little red coat, and the sound he made then was not a scream anymore. It was lower than that. It came from somewhere under everything. People around them stopped. You'd think in the middle of all that, with the sirens and the smoke, nobody would have a second to spare. But a little circle of strangers just stopped and stood and let it happen. A ring of people, none of whom knew each other, watching a father get his son back. And I swear half of them were crying. I know I was. My face was wet and I hadn't noticed it start. And the guard. I looked at the guard. He had not moved from his post. He was upright, rifle correct, bearskin level, eyes forward. The parade ground stillness was fully back, like it had never cracked, like none of it had happened. To a tourist arriving in that exact second, he'd have looked like every photo you've ever seen, the unmoving guard, the costume, the strange, beautiful uselessness of it. But I'd been watching the whole time, and I saw the one thing that gave him away. He was looking at the father and the boy, just with his eyes. Not his head stayed forward, regulation perfect. But his eyes had cut sideways all the way to the corner, holding on that little folded-up family on the ground, and they stayed there for maybe 2 seconds. And in those 2 seconds something moved across that young, rigid, disciplined face. Relief. Pure relief, the kind that goes all the way down. And his jaw worked once, swallowing something. And then his eyes came back to forward, to the middle distance, to nothing, to his post. And he stood his post. The police line reached us a few minutes later, and after that the morning stopped being ours. That's the strange, almost lonely part nobody warns you about. For a little while, 10 minutes, maybe less, that patch of ground had belonged to the people standing on it. We'd run our own search. We'd found a lost boy. We'd held each other up. It had been ours, this terrible thing, and we'd been equal to it. And then the professionals arrived, the way they're supposed to, and they were brilliant and fast and exactly what you'd want, and they took it all back. Officers in those heavy vests moving in this controlled, unhurried hurry. Tape going up. A loud, calm voice telling everybody to move back, this way please, keep moving off the open ground. The whole human mess of us being gently, firmly turned into a crowd to be managed. I want to be clear, I was grateful. We all were. You could feel the relief move through people as the uniform spread out, the relief of being told what to do by someone who knew. But there was a small ache underneath it too. The ache of handing your own bravery back, of becoming ordinary again. They moved us west, away from the smoke. I got back to my mother. She was exactly where I'd left her, both hands on that black railing, white-knuckled. And when she saw me, she didn't say anything. She just reached out and put her hand flat against my chest, over my heart, and left it there a second. Checking. The way she used to when I was small and had a fever. I put my hand over hers. They found him, I said. The little boy, a girl, found him. He's with his dad. And my tough old mother, who had buried a husband and raised 3 children alone, and never once let any of us see her cry. She made a small sound and pressed her lips together and nodded fast, and looked away at the trees, and I let her. As they moved us back, I got one last clear look at the guard's post. There were officers near him now. The ground he'd been protecting, that quiet stretch behind the box, the access to whatever lay beyond it, was secured properly now, by people with radios and a plan and numbers on their side. He wasn't the only line anymore. He hadn't been alone for some minutes, I realized. The system had caught up to him. But for those first long minutes before any of them arrived, he had been it. One young man and a rifle and a small wooden box, standing between a panicking city and the thing behind him, and he had not given an inch. The father was being walked away by a paramedic, the boy still glued to him, that little red coat over his father's shoulder. And as they passed the post, the father stopped. He turned to the guard. I was too far to hear it now. The crowd noise and the tan and the sirens had swallowed the small sounds. But I didn't need to hear it. I could see it. The father had his free arm out, reaching, his face doing that thing a face does when there are no words big enough and it tries to use the whole body instead. He wanted to thank him. He wanted to grab him, hold him, say the unsayable thing, "You stopped me. You stopped me from running into that. I'd have died in there and my boy would have watched. And you wouldn't let me, and you found him. You found my son." And the guard stood his post. He looked straight ahead. He did not take the father's hand. He did not turn. He gave him nothing, no nod, no smile, no flicker, because that is the thing he is, because the post does not end just because the worst is over, because there were still officers working a live scene behind him and his job was not finished and would not be finished for hours yet. He stood there, eyes forward, perfectly still, and let a weeping father reach toward him and get no answer at all. And it should have looked cold. I keep saying that, I know. But I've been watching him for the whole of that morning, and I knew by then how to read the stillness, and it was the furthest thing from cold I have ever seen. It was a man holding the line so hard, so completely, that he wouldn't even let himself have the one moment of warmth he had absolutely earned. He wouldn't take the thank you. He couldn't. The thank you was a thing for after, and there was no after yet. There was only the post. The paramedic understood, I think. She put a gentle hand on the father's back and turned him away, and the father went, looking back over his shoulder the whole time at the still red figure, and the guard never once looked back at him. That's the image I carry. That's the one. A father carrying his son to safety, looking back, and a young man in a tall black hat staring straight ahead at nothing, holding everything in, asking for nothing, given nothing, wanting nothing, except to finish the duty he'd been given. We didn't see how it ended. We were moved out to a holding area, given water and a foil blanket I didn't think I needed until somebody put it round my shoulders and I started shaking. They took our details. They were kind. Hours later we were back at the hotel and the television was full of it. The way these things fill a television. The experts and the loops of footage and the words underneath. And I sat on the end of the bed and watched a version of my own morning told back to me by people who hadn't been there, and it felt like a story about someone else. They didn't show the guard. Of course they didn't. Why would they? It wasn't the headline. The headline was the blast, the casualties fewer than the first reports feared. Thank God, though not none, never none, and I won't pretend it was a morning without grief, because somewhere in that city that day were families whose worst moment had only just begun. I hold that too. You have to hold both. The boy who was found and the ones who weren't so lucky. A morning is big enough to hold both, even if a story struggles to. But on the television, the guard didn't exist. There was no footage of a young man standing still. Stillness doesn't film well. It isn't dramatic enough. The cameras want movement, and he didn't give them any. And so the bravest thing I saw that day went unrecorded by everyone except the few hundred of us who happened to be standing close enough to need it. My mother fell asleep early, exhausted in that bone-deep way. I sat up. I couldn't stop seeing his face, the corner of his eye cutting sideways to that little family on the ground, the relief moving across it, the jaw working once, and then the eyes coming back to forward, back to the post. I used to walk past men like that and feel nothing. Worse than nothing, a kind of mild amusement, the tourist smirk, look at the funny, serious man in the silly hat who isn't allowed to move. I'd taken photographs trying to make one laugh once years ago like everyone does. I'm ashamed of that now. I didn't understand what I was looking at. I thought the stillness was the absence of a person. I thought there was nothing inside the uniform but rules. There's a whole human being inside the uniform. There's a young man with a mother of his own somewhere, probably, who worries about him. There's fear in there, real fear, the same fear I had, he just doesn't let it out where it would frighten the rest of us. There's the same instinct to run that I had, the same desperate human pull toward the people who are suffering, the same wish to be kind, all of it, every bit of it, alive and roaring inside that still red figure. He just carries it. He carries it so that we don't have to. That's the job. That's the whole job. To stand still and carry it so that frightened strangers have something to steer by. I think about him on ordinary days now. That's the odd part. Not so much on dramatic days, on ordinary days. When something small in my own life is hard and what I want to do is run from it, make a scene, let it all spill out where it'll splash on the people around me. Sometimes now, I think of a young man in a tall black hat on a gray morning, standing perfectly still while the world came apart, holding everything in, asking for nothing. And I stand a little straighter, and I hold the line, whatever my small line happens to be that day. I never learned his name. I never will. He was one of hundreds of them, and any one of them, I believe now, would have done exactly the same, because that's what the stillness is for. That's what it was always for, and the rest of us just never bothered to look closely enough to see it. So this is me looking closely. This is me telling it the only way I can to whoever's listening. A bomb went off near the park that morning, and the whole world ran. The birds went up and the people scattered and the smoke climbed into the gray, and everything that could move, moved. And one man didn't. One man stood his post. And I think about him every single day.